Hey guys, welcome back. So with us continuing to get caught up on Blood Hunt, most of our focus is going to proceed with the 5-part series with a bit of tie-in information sprinkled in here and there, because trying to cover every last issue it's going to be really redundant, or at least it would be. And I'll give you guys a prime example of how as we make our way through this one, because some of these tie-ins could have been just an extra 2 pages within the main story, but I get it, gotta hit those numbers. So with that said, if you're enjoying these videos, be sure to drop a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and don't forget to hit that bell up top to get all notifications so we can squad up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so picking up with Blood Hunt Part 2, we find ourselves at the Impossible City, the recent sentient home base of the Avengers that is now taken over by Blade. And for a moment here, he mentions how this is a place that monsters call home once more, which is a reference to a group called the Ashen Combine, I think it was, which is a group of villains who were prisoners here at one point, who took the city from the heroes that were here before them. So yeah, this place goes back and forth quite a bit. But like we've seen before, he has a few of the Avengers here, like Thor for example, who's being drained of his god blood to feed the Blood Coven. He has Wanda Maximoff here, and T'Challa as well, where in T'Challa's case, Blade's turned him because he has a specific mission that he wants T'Challa to do. And we'll talk more about what that is and how it goes throughout the course of this series. But just know for now, T'Challa's doing his best to try to fight against and resist the influence and commands of the Lord of Vampires. So going forward, we see Blade send out T'Challa to get his prize, and in the case of the Blood Coven, they're told to head down to Earth and find Blade's daughter, which from here sends us over to New York, where we find a woman trying to protect her 2 kids from a group of vampires who've got them cornered in an alley. But they're suddenly saved when Bloodline, Blade's daughter, steps in, which for us is how we find out that her and Dracula have made their way to New York. But as far as Dracula's concerned, he doesn't want Brielle out here on the streets trying to save any and every person she comes across. And he even tells her that she's too important to risk her life for insignificance. And I mean, it's kind of messed up, because Dracula, he really doesn't care about the everyday person, but he's also trying to get Brielle to understand that the 2 of them are vulnerable out here, and the longer they tarry, the slimmer their chances get to come out on top. But in the middle of him explaining this to Brielle, they get confronted by the Blood Coven, who's led by Bloodstorm 1, the clone of Dracula, who has evolved since they last met. But as soon as they show up, Dracula tries to pull rank on these guys by telling them to stand down since he's the Lord of Vampires. But Bloodstorm 1 just tells him no, and that Dracula's a false lord, a false king, and they serve the true lord, the true philosophy of their kind. Which again, sounds like something a vampire would say if their true leader was Varney. But this ambush doesn't exactly go the way that the Blood Coven would have liked, because Captain America Sam Wilson, Iron Man Carol Danvers, and Vision show up to take on the Blood Coven once again. But this time, because they know what they're getting into, it tips the scales tremendously in the Avengers' favor. Because first and foremost, right off the bat, Vision snatches up Megrim, who last time, Megrim was the one who crippled their minds so they couldn't fight. And the only reason this worked on Vision before is because his synthetic brain is so close to a human's, it can leave him susceptible to a telepathic attack. So to avoid that happening again, Vision just cranks up the cycles on his brain pattern. He literally just overclocks himself so that Megrim can't lock onto his mind. And it's pretty clever because it just leads to Vision taking Megrim up above the clouds, above the Dark Force energy, to catch a tan really quick. Meanwhile, back on the ground, the Blood Coven, they now have to actually face the Avengers. No mind tricks, they gotta go toe to toe and blow for blow. So this time around, with Tony learning his lesson after Cruel's razor wire made its way into his armor, he made sure this time he came back with some wildly oscillating magnetic fields to stop any bad actors from slipping into his cracks. And it turns out to work really well. But while Tony's fighting Cruel, Damascene tries to sneak up on him from behind, but he gets sunblasted out of nowhere, followed by a burst of solar energy, with Vision making its way back from above the clouds, charged up by the sunlight. Though it's only a burst of sunlight for a moment. So following this, Captain Marvel, she shoots a hole through the Dark Force energy barrier, which then creates this huge God Ray effect, with the sunlight coming through and giving the heroes even more of an advantage. And it's around this time here where Carol, she gives this short speech, and I'm not too crazy about it, it's a little on the Pepperjack side, but she does make a good point here, because she starts off by telling Bloodstorm 1 and the Blood Coven that this is the Avengers at half strength. And I mean, really, it's less than that. But I mean, it's a good point, because imagine if Thor, Wanda, T'Challa, and the others were here. It would have been a lot worse for the Blood Coven. And really quick before I forget, because I do want to mention, because I imagine somebody's watching and thinking, well, how is Dracula standing in the sunlight? I want to say that just goes back to what we saw early on in the 2020 Wolverine series, when Dracula took Wolverine's blood and did a transfusion-like process that ended up giving him the ability to walk in sunlight, because outside of that, I don't recall anything changing or taking that away. But nonetheless, when this happens, Bloodstorm 1 tells the Blood Coven to book it. And Sam Wilson, he's not feeling that, so he goes after them. But Carol stops him and she tells him they'll take the Impossible City back and they'll save their friends. But obviously, just charging in there without a plan, and that ain't the move. So following this, they make their way to see Doctor Strange. And aside from this, we're also shown Tigra and Hunter's Moon, who are fighting off a ton of vampires, when they're suddenly met by Miles Morales, who overheard them saying that they're going to see Doctor Strange for help. So for a moment here, this really just ends up overlapping with what we saw in Doctor Strange issue 15, with the minor addition of us seeing the conversation between the three of them on the way. Where in that case, it was really just Miles saying that he didn't know where Doctor Strange's house was. So of course Tigra had to clown him for that. And Hunter's Moon doesn't say nothing at first, but later on he tells Miles that he didn't know either. And I mean, really, I could see something like this going either way. Because on one hand, it's not their neck of the woods, but on the other hand, it's the Sanctum Sanctorum, my guy. Like, that's gotta be one of those locations that are already filled out in Google Maps. But either way, like we saw, when they get here, Doctor Strange is already in ghost mode. So he explains to them what happened just before they got here, and also why his body is a mindless, bloodthirsty vampire, who they haven't quite figured out what to do with yet. So yeah, this is what brings Dracula and the others over to what we saw in Doctor Strange issue 15. So now each group can fill in each other on what they know about this whole situation. But as soon as everyone gets here, we get this moment where Brielle, she's happy to see Miles, because for her, this whole situation's been like a shock to the system. So it gives her a moment where she's able to see a familiar and friendly face for a change, since recently Miles teamed up with her and her dad back in Miles Morales issue 11, which, come to think of it, perhaps wasn't too recent. But as soon as Miles sees Brielle, they notice that something's not quite right with him, and the reason why is because Miles is a vampire, where in this case, this is something we're shown more of in Miles Morales issue 21, by way of a flashback that goes back to Blood Hunt issue 1. So I just see it as one of those things where it's like, you know, why not mention it now? Because back when everything first kicked off, when we saw Blade approach Miles and tell him that he's got a plan, but also there's something he needs Miles to do for him, well, now we see how exactly that conversation went. Because at first there was a bit of small talk with the two of them catching up, but as this continued, Blade started moving closer and closer to Miles, to where eventually Miles was just like, okay, well, what exactly do you need from me? So Blade's like, before I tell you, I'm gonna need to change your perspective. Which then just causes Miles' spider sense to go on the fritz, but he doesn't realize that Blade is the threat until it's too late. So Blade ends up catching Miles slipping and biting him on the neck, to where from here there's a brief fight between the two. Miles even whips out the biokinetic sword, but even still, it's one of those things where Blade admits that Miles has gotten better at using the sword, and for a minute it's like Miles is kind of feeling himself since he's going toe to toe with Blade. But Blade just calls him out for being a bit too cocky, because without a question, if they continue with the swordplay, Miles is just not going to be able to keep up. And aside from that, Blade, he's really fast, and I think most casual fans don't really pick that up, and I mean perhaps those who have seen the older movies. But yeah, he's insanely quick. And I mean, it's not to the point where Blade's gonna open up in the next movie talking about, my name is Eric Brooks, and I'm the fastest man alive. No, it's more of an explosive speed, and this ends up catching Miles off guard. But this flashback ends with us seeing Miles getting ready to hit Blade with a venom blast, before it goes back to the real-time events. But I mention this here because much like we saw earlier, when Blade sent T'Challa on his mission, and he sent the Blood Coven to find his daughter, it's here where we find out that Blade's secret mission for Miles was for him to go after Brielle as well. And it's caught everyone off guard. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.